Samarkand, 400 AD. A merchant sits in a caravanserai on the eastern edge of the city, writing a letter home. He has been on the road for months, across the Taklamakan desert, through the mountain passes of the Pamirs, along the edge of the Gobi, where the wind carries sand that gets into everything. He is tired. He is worried. The news from the west is bad. The city of Dunhuang, where his family lives, has been raided. His wife has not written. His business partner has disappeared. He needs money. The letter he writes is in Sogdian, a language that most of the world has never heard of. Written in a script that most of the world cannot read, sent along a trade route that most of the world has forgotten. It will take weeks to arrive. It may never arrive. 1600 years later, a British archaeologist named Aurel Stein will find it in an abandoned watchtower on the edge of the Gobi Desert. Still in the envelope it was never delivered in, along with 7 other letters written by Sogdian merchants stranded by the chaos of the same crisis. These letters, the ancient Sogdian letters, dated to approximately 313 AD, are the oldest surviving private correspondence in Central Asian history. They are the most intimate window into the lives of the people who ran the Silk Road for 700 years. And almost nobody outside a small community of specialists has heard of the civilization that wrote them. Sogdia is not a name that appears on most maps of the ancient world. It occupies the territory of what is now Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, the Zeravshan River Valley, and the oasis cities of Samarkand, Bukhara, Kesh, and Samarkand. It is not a military power. It does not build a great empire in the conventional sense. No conquest state, no unified monarchy extending across a continent. It is something rarer and, in commercial terms, more powerful, a network. The geography of Sogdia explains everything. The oasis cities of the Zeravshan Valley sit precisely at the intersection of the major trade routes connecting China in the east, India in the south, Persia in the west, and the steppe nomads of the north. Every caravan moving between these civilizations must pass through or near Sogdian territory. The Sogdians do not simply benefit from this geography. They exploit it with a commercial intelligence that has no parallel in the ancient world between the fall of Carthage and the rise of Venice. The Sogdian merchant diaspora, the network of Sogdian trading communities established along the Silk Road from China to the Byzantine Empire, is the commercial infrastructure of the ancient world's most valuable trade route. Sogdian merchants do not simply carry goods from one end of the route to the other. They establish permanent colonies at every major node along the route. In Chinese cities like Dunhuang, Turfan, Luoyang, and Chang'an. In the oasis towns of Central Asia. In the Persian cities of the West. These colonies function as trading houses, banking facilities, information networks, and cultural transmission points simultaneously. The ancient Sogdian letters capture this diaspora at a moment of crisis, when the political order that has protected the trade routes is fragmenting under the pressure of nomadic invasions. But the letters also reveal the extraordinary sophistication of the network in its normal operation. Merchants writing to colleagues about commodity prices, asking for credit advances, reporting on political conditions along the route, requesting specific goods to be sent on the next caravan. This is not primitive barter exchange. This is a sophisticated commercial intelligence network operating across 5,000 kilometers. The silk that gives the Silk Road its name is the most valuable commodity moving through the Sogdian commercial network, but it is not the only one and not always the most important. Silk itself is a Chinese state secret in the early centuries of the Common Era. The silkworm, the mulberry tree it feeds on, and the technique for processing the cocoon into thread are under Chinese imperial embargo. Exporting silk production technology is a capital offense. The finished fabric, however, flows westward in enormous quantities, because the demand in Persia, Byzantium, and Rome for Chinese silk is apparently insatiable. Roman emperors passed sumptuary laws restricting silk consumption to the upper classes because the outflow of gold to pay for it is draining the Roman monetary system. The laws do not work. the silk keeps flowing. The Sogdians are the primary intermediaries making it flow. The price differential that makes this trade so profitable is staggering. Silk purchased in China for a given weight of silver sells in the Roman Empire for 10 to 20 times that price by the time it has crossed Central Asia, Persia, and the Eastern Mediterranean. The Sogdian merchant, who manages even a fraction of that price differential across a single caravan journey, is generating returns that no agricultural investment in the ancient world can approach. The risk is real: bandits, political instability, desert crossings, mountain passes that kill animals and men. But the reward is calibrated to the risk in a way that keeps the caravans moving through every political disruption, short of complete route closure. The Sogdians also carry lapis lazuli from the mines of Afghanistan, the brilliant blue stone that colors the paintings of medieval European churches and the portraits of Egyptian pharaohs. All of it sourced from a single valley in the Hindu Kush and distributed across the ancient world through Sogdian commercial networks. They carry Chinese porcelain westward and Byzantine glass eastward. They carry Indian spices, Central Asian horses, the heavenly horses of Fergana that Chinese emperors covet for their military, Persian silver, Roman gold, and the countless manufactured goods that flow between civilizations that would otherwise have no commercial contact. They carry ideas. The Sogdians are not simply commercial intermediaries. They are cultural transmission agents, the people through whom Buddhism travels from India to China, through whom Zoroastrian religious practices spread across Central Asia, through whom the Nestorian Christian communities of the Middle East established themselves as far east as Tang dynasty China. The Sogdian commercial network is simultaneously a religious and cultural network, and its reach into China, where Sogdian merchants established themselves as advisors to Tang dynasty emperors and entertainers in the cosmopolitan cities of the period, makes the Tang dynasty's celebrated cultural openness partly a product of Sogdian commercial penetration. The Sogdian merchant who is writing that letter from the caravanserai in 400 AD is not an adventurer or an explorer. He is a professional, trained from youth in the languages, the commercial practices, and the route knowledge that his trade requires. Sogdian merchants speak multiple languages as a matter of professional necessity: Chinese, Persian, Turkic, Prakrit, and their own language at minimum, often more. The multilingualism is commercial infrastructure. A merchant who cannot communicate directly with his customers and suppliers is dependent on intermediaries who extract a margin from every transaction. The training begins early. Sogdian boys from merchant families are apprenticed at age 12 or 13, sent east with experienced traders to learn the routes, the languages, the commodity markets, and the relationship management that long-distance trade requires. They are away from home for years at a time. The ancient Sogdian letters document the emotional cost of this separation. Letters from wives who have not heard from husbands for months. Letters from merchants trying to locate partners who have gone silent. The loneliness and uncertainty of a professional life conducted in perpetual motion across hostile terrain. One of the ancient Sogdian letters, written by a woman named Nanai Dat, describes her situation with a directness that crosses 16 centuries without losing its force. Her husband has been gone for 3 years. She has received no money, no word, no indication of whether he is alive. She is living with her mother-in-law, who treats her badly. She has considered remarrying but does not know if she is a widow or simply abandoned. She asks her father to come and take her away from the situation or to send instructions. She is, in every recognizable sense, a woman in an impossible position created by a commercial system that requires men to be absent for years at a time and provides no mechanism for the families left behind when the system breaks down. The letter was never delivered. Nanai Dat never received an answer. What happened to her is unknown. What is known is that she wrote the letter, that a postal system existed capable of transmitting it across thousands of kilometers, and that the crisis that stranded her husband, the same political disruption that appears in multiple letters from this period, was severe enough to sever the communication networks that Sogdian commercial civilization depended on. Her letter survives because it never arrived. It is the most human document in the entire Sogdian archive. The commercial practices the merchants develop are sophisticated beyond what their era might suggest. Sogdian merchants use credit instruments, essentially early bills of exchange, that allow value to be transferred across the Silk Road without physically moving gold or silver. A merchant in Samarkand can issue a credit note to a colleague in Dunhuang, who can redeem it with a Sogdian banking house in Chang'an, the Tang dynasty capital. The network of trust that makes this system work, the knowledge that a Sogdian credit instrument will be honored at the other end of a 5,000-kilometer route, is itself a commercial asset, built over generations of reliable dealing and backed by the reputation of specific merchant families whose names appear repeatedly across centuries of commercial documents. The Sogdians survive and prosper for 7 centuries in one of the most politically volatile regions on Earth, a landscape that sees the rise and fall of the Persian Empire, the Macedonian conquest, the Parthian kingdom, the Kushan Empire, the Hephthalite Hunnic Confederation, the Sassanid Persian Empire, the Western and Eastern Turkic Khaganates, and eventually the Islamic Umayyad Caliphate, by mastering a form of political intelligence that military powers consistently underestimate. The key is the relationship with the steppe nomads. The great nomadic confederations, the Huns, the Turks, the Xiongnu, are the military powers of Central Asia, capable of overwhelming any sedentary state that resists them and of controlling the overland routes that the Sogdian commercial network depends on. The standard response of sedentary civilizations to nomadic power is military resistance, tribute payment, or war building. The Sogdian response is commercial integration. Sogdian merchants establish themselves as the financial managers, the commercial advisors, and the luxury goods suppliers of nomadic Khans and Khagans across Central Asia. They provide the silk, the silver, the manufactured goods, and the commercial services that nomadic elites want but cannot produce themselves. In exchange, they receive protection, the guarantee that their caravans will not be raided, that their trading colonies will not be destroyed, that the routes will remain open. What makes this arrangement so durable is that the Sogdians never overreach. They do not seek political power over the nomads they serve. They do not attempt to convert them or reform their customs. They provide exactly what is wanted, collect exactly what is owed, and remain commercially indispensable without becoming politically threatening. It is the most refined expression of the principle that sustains Sogdian civilization across 7 centuries of imperial change. Be too useful to destroy and too unthreatening to bother eliminating. Every empire that rolls through Central Asia finds the Sogdian merchants already there, already speaking the language, already knowing what is needed, and decides, correctly, that absorbing them is more profitable than removing them. The sophistication of this arrangement becomes visible in the surviving murals of Sogdian palace complexes, particularly the paintings discovered at Afrasiab near Samarkand and at Panjikent. These murals depict Sogdian nobles receiving ambassadors from the Chinese emperor, negotiating with Turkic Khans, entertaining at elaborate banquets with musicians and dancers, and conducting the commercial and diplomatic business that sustains their position. The Sogdians present themselves as civilized intermediaries between the great powers, too useful to any of them to be worth destroying, too commercially sophisticated to be easily replaced. The Islamic armies that sweep out of Arabia in the 7th century represent the one force that the Sogdian commercial genius cannot fully accommodate. The Arab conquest of Persia in the 640s and the subsequent advance into Central Asia in the 670s and 680s brings a military and ideological force whose agenda is not commercial integration but religious conversion and political subordination. The Sogdian cities resist. Samarkand, Bukhara, and the other oasis cities fight the Arab armies with a ferocity that reflects the understanding that what is at stake is not simply political sovereignty, but the entire commercial order that Sogdian civilization has built. The resistance is ultimately unsuccessful. By the early 8th century, the major Sogdian cities are under Umayyad control. The Arab governor al-Hajjaj and his successors impose Islam, Arabic administrative practices, and the political framework of the caliphate on a civilization that has been operating on entirely different principles for 7 centuries. The Sogdians do what they have always done. They adapt. Conversion to Islam proceeds gradually but substantially. Sogdian merchants integrate into the commercial networks of the Islamic world, bringing their expertise in long-distance trade, their multilingualism, their credit instruments, and their route knowledge into the service of the new order. The commercial infrastructure that the Sogdians have built does not disappear with the Arab conquest. It is absorbed and eventually transforms the commercial practices of the Islamic world itself. But the distinctly Sogdian civilization, the specific combination of Zoroastrian religion, Iranian language, independent oasis city governance, and commercial network organization that has characterized the Sogdian world for centuries, is gone within 2 or 3 generations of the conquest. The language is replaced by Arabic and Persian. The Zoroastrian temples are converted or demolished. The independent city governance structures are absorbed into the caliphate's administrative hierarchy. The murals in the palaces are plastered over by new owners who consider the figurative art they depict incompatible with Islamic practice. The Sogdians do not disappear without leaving traces. They leave them everywhere, embedded in the civilizations they connected, in the commercial practices they transmitted, and in the cultural products they carried from one end of the ancient world to the other. The Chinese script that the Uyghur people used for writing, and that the Mongols subsequently adapted for their own language, and that the Manchu further adapted. The entire family of scripts used by the nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples of Central and East Asia derives from the Sogdian alphabet. The Mongol Empire's administrative language uses a script that traces directly to the Sogdian merchants who served as advisors to Turkic Khans centuries before Genghis Khan was born. Every document produced by the Mongol imperial administration is written in a script whose ultimate ancestor is the commercial alphabet of the Samarkand trading houses. The word for merchant in multiple Central Asian and Chinese languages derives from Sogdian commercial vocabulary. The organizational model of the caravanserai, the roadside inn and commercial facility that makes a long-distance overland trade possible across the Islamic world, reflects Sogdian commercial infrastructure developed over centuries. The credit instruments that Sogdian merchants pioneered continue in modified form in Islamic commercial practice and eventually flow into the European commercial revolution of the medieval period through channels that historians are still tracing. The Tang dynasty's famous cosmopolitanism, the openness to foreign goods, foreign religions, foreign entertainers, and foreign advisors that makes the Tang court one of the most culturally diverse in Chinese history, is substantially a product of Sogdian commercial and cultural penetration. The musicians, dancers, and acrobats who entertain Tang emperors are frequently Sogdian. The merchants who bring the exotic goods that fill the markets of Chang'an and Luoyang are predominantly Sogdian. The religious traditions, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Nestorianism, that make the Tang capital a city of multiple faiths coexisting under imperial tolerance are transmitted through Sogdian commercial networks. The civilization that nobody remembers built the infrastructure that made the ancient world's most important trade route function for 7 centuries. Its language is extinct. Its religion is extinct. Its political structures have been absorbed into successor states that do not preserve its name. Its murals are buried under centuries of subsequent construction. Its letters are found in abandoned watchtowers at the edge of the Gobi desert, still sealed in their envelopes, addressed to people who never received them. The merchant who wrote that letter in 400 AD, sitting in a caravanserai in Samarkand, worried about his wife and his money and his missing business partner. He is us. He is the recognizable human being at the center of a commercial civilization so sophisticated that it will not be matched until Venice rises from its lagoon 1,000 years later. He deserved to be remembered. History forgot to do it.